So I thought I'd like to start with a Māori proverb, which is one of the key ones that often gets talked about in New Zealand, and it's He aha te mea nui Aotearoa, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. What is the most important thing in the world? It is people, it is people, it is people. And it actually starts off talking about if you take the heart out of the harakeke, the flax, then where will the bellbird sing and feed? And it's also about that relationship between people and land and environment, which I think encapsulates the importance of all the different domains. So I'll just talk about this very briefly, but we have 5 household surveys, which is supported by a census of population and dwellings. We are going through a bit of a refocus, so all this might change a little bit. But we have 3 surveys that really talk about wellbeing. So our General Social Survey, Te Kupenga, which is our Māori Social Survey, Disability Survey. And these focus on wellbeing measurement for different groups. So the General Social Survey is about the whole population. Te Kupenga is for Māori, who are Indigenous people, and Disability Survey is trying to get the wellbeing of people with disabilities. So next slide, thanks. So I won't talk about all the things because we actually have, I think, over 400 variables in our General Social Survey, but we collect a whole lot of information. And one of the reasons why I love this, and I was so keen to be part of your wonderful wellbeing conference, even though I'm actually overseas on holiday at the moment, is just the importance of wellbeing. It is the surveys that we have where we're actually saying to people that everybody counts, how you feel, your health, your relationship, your idea, your sense of trust, they all matter. And these are all questions that we ask. And the real power of our social surveys is you can ask some things like life satisfaction, how you feel about the future, what your sense of trust is, what your house is like. And then you can then look at, well, how do they interact? So these are some of the things that we ask. And so next slide. So we do that to measure wellbeing. So your whole conference has been on wellbeing, so you don't need the introduction from me. So it's a complex and non-standardized concept. Like it's multidimensional and it can be subjective and objective. And there's a whole lot of different frameworks that I think you've been talking about some at your conference that define these dimensions. So in New Zealand, we have some ones that are related to health, are related to various Indigenous people with various aspects. And then we have the Treasury Living Standards Framework, which takes wellbeing data and it's trying to go beyond GDP and sort of measure not just the economy, but how people are feeling. So a lot of the measures that we collect here are used in the Treasury Living Standards Framework. So we have 3 main subjective wellbeing measures, but of course other ones as well. The evaluation, how satisfied you are with your life. Eudaimonia, do you have purpose in life? And I was really interested in the previous speakers and them talking about it. And the experience, how are you feeling right now? And those are the really key ones. And then it's how it interacts with all the other domains that's very important. So next slide, thanks. So while we use these general kind of wellbeing frameworks, we have also been influenced by some of the Indigenous frameworks that are being used within New Zealand. And I've just shown you one here. It's probably one of the most famous one. A lot of these relate to health, but they have influenced things, particularly our Te Kupenga survey. And this is this idea of that wellbeing frameworks. There's like 4 key parts to it. And they all need to be strong for wellbeing to be strong. So for Māori, that's taha, hinagaro, mental health, and the fact that the mind and body are inseparable, that you can't have a healthy body without a healthy mind. Taha whānau, and that's about family, and that's how important it is, social connection. Taha tinanga, physical health, and the importance of good physical health, which also comes through very clearly when I'll talk about some of these interactivities later on. And taha wairua, and that's spiritual health. And these are key for Māori and for Pacific peoples as well, but we have some other kind of frameworks, but essentially they're very they're quite similar, and they're all about how all these different parts interact, and without all these being strong, people cannot be feeling secure in terms of their well-being. So next slide. So when we go out and do a survey, we don't just take a whole lot of stuff from overseas, put it together and go and talk to the population. We do use the key OECD wellbeing questions. They're really great, and we do look at what's available internationally. But we work with our partner agencies and we consult with relevant groups when we're developing content of surveys. And generally, it's an interesting process because everyone would want a whole lot of things, and we have to limit the space for our survey. We aim for about 50 minutes, and it has crept over that slightly. But one good thing about the survey is a lot of people really enjoy doing it because actually it's about them, it's about how they feel. And so our collectors like collecting it, and people generally enjoy doing the survey. Next slide. So I'll talk about the consultation for our 3 different social surveys. So our general social survey first went into the field in 2008, but there was quite a substantial consultation process with that. Combination of government agencies, people from the community, academics, and non-government agencies. So we did revamp it in 2012 when we made the decision to have special rotating modules where we could collect more detailed information. So for instance, in 2018, we looked at housing and physical environment, including things like access to key services like doctors, and how people felt about the environment and climate change, etc. So we develop everything in conjunction with modules to identify key topics, and we use or develop new questions, and we always go through a cognitive test sure that they work. And I was talking to a person working on the disability survey, and she said some of the international questions just didn't work well in the New Zealand context. So that's always something to be aware of. Next slide, thank you. So for Te Kupenga, we first developed this in 2013, and then we ran it again in 2018. That was a very extensive consultation process. We looked at government agencies and Māori stakeholders. And so it was a survey that was also designed by Māori for Māori, with people from the agency, questionnaire designers. So what we came up with was something very different to all our other surveys. It has a whole lot of key wellbeing measures, but ones that were also designed to be key for Māori. And I'll just a quote here from Sir Mason Jury. Being Māori also means being able to have access to Te Ao Māori, which is the Māori world, access to language, culture, marae, tikanga, and resources. And when we again went out in 2018, what also came through was really clear was we needed information about the environment. Next slide. So it was designed to really have key objectives of wellbeing measurement. So as I said, in combination with those other measures, it had 4 statistics on key areas of Māori cultural wellbeing. So if you think back to the Te Whare Tapa Whā model, it was looking at whāruatanga, which is spirituality, tikama, customs and practices, te reo Māori, the language, of whanaungatanga, which is social connectedness. And it recognised practices and wellbeing outcomes that were particularly specific to Māori culture. One of the key things as well is it also went beyond the individual and the household to the wellbeing of the whānau, but community and the environment. Next slide. So the last survey I'll talk about in terms of consultation is our disability survey. It's actually went into the field last year. It's a post-Census survey. We did public consultation, and because it had been 10 years since the previous survey, there was quite an extensive consultation again. And it was open, but it was also targeted at disabled people and their families. And so they used things like social media or disability support networks. And what I thought was really great about it is that it was made as accessible and inclusive as possible. So people could send in a written submission, a video or audio, or they could send in image files. And we had a really good range of submissions, so over 200, which included people with a lived experience of disability. And that was really important because we want to make sure it was something disability community, not just something that comes from government and doesn't have that sense of connection. So next slide, thank you. So what I'm going to talk about lastly is just linking wellbeing across domains and the richness that we get from the fact that we've collected all this information, and any one aspect you could look at. So you could look at trust and then compare it with a whole other lot of other things like life satisfaction or social connection, or you could look at someone's physical activity and look at that in conjunction to life satisfaction. So next slide. So for Māori, we've found there was a real link between environment and wellbeing measures, as well as social connection and cultural health and physical health. We've done some sort of modelling of what are the key determinants of life satisfaction. The data is used being quite extensively by government, but also by a lot of academics. There's been a lot of research that's been done on these various social surveys. And one thing about it is it's a kind of strength-based approach to this as well. So with wellbeing data, you can focus on like the of, we information on volunteering, and so you can look at parts of the community that may be worse off, but they have rich social connectedness. Next slide. So these are just some of the key findings, a little taster of the kind of richness that you can get from looking at about wellbeing across domains. So we've done this modelling back in around 2012, and then we had someone a couple of years ago sort of relook at it to see whether the key determinants of life satisfaction were still the same. So it did actually come out as still very, and it's quite similar to what happens overseas, that there's a whole lot of things that have a relationship with well-being, but the strongest things were when someone reported having excellent or very good health, so health is extremely important, material well-being, so having enough or more than enough money to meet everyday needs, and then that social connection. So if someone did not feel lonely in the last 4 weeks, and then lastly, whether people had a problem with their home. So housing issues also turned out to have quite a relationship with poor mental well-being. So this one shows you life satisfaction. So you can see that if you had 4 good outcomes in all these aspects, you had 95% had high overall life satisfaction, and that's on a 11-point scale, 7 or more. Whereas if you had none of these particular 4 good outcomes, only about half of people had good overall life satisfaction. Next slide. So for Te Kupenga, I'm just going to show a couple of slides that talks about the importance of the environment for Māori. And so one of our Māori analysts sort of said to me that Māori cannot have well-being if the well-being of the environment is not good. So you can see that reflected in when we ask people that the health of the natural environment to the environment was regarded as deeply important for Māori. So next slide. And so around a third of Māori participated in looking after the health of the natural environment. And what's really key, because Māori and a lot of our Pacific cultures are more collective, is that it was most commonly done with whānau, so that's family. So around 40% looked after the environment with whānau. Next slide. So this slide is just about Pacific people. So I'm a housing specialist, so we did quite an extensive look at Pacific people and their sense of well-being, and we looked at things like family, and we also looked at housing. And so this one actually shows that interaction between housing and well-being, that if you had at least one major housing problem, there was much lower sense of life satisfaction, overall poor well-being, and also it affected people's health. And we know that there's a strong relationship between poor housing and health. And so Pacific people in New Zealand have particularly poor housing. but these kind of interactions also happen for other ethnic groups within New Zealand. Next slide. So, and then one of our other major projects was looking at people with disabilities. So we did a disability report using data from the Disability Survey, the 2013 one, the General Social Survey and the Census, and it looked at different aspects of wellbeing for people with disabilities. And this one talks about work life. It's just a little snippet from one of our infographics. But people with disabilities were less likely to feel satisfied with their work. They also had poorer sense of social connection and tended to live in worse housing. So that's why we did the disability gap. And it really showed that the key thing is if parts of your life are not supporting you, it's very hard to maintain a sense of well-being. So next slide. And so one of the things that we've done with the Te Kupenga survey, some of the ideas from that have ended up in the General Social Survey. So one of the things we have asked about, generally social surveys tend to look at more individual stuff, but we've asked a lot about family and whānau wellbeing. And we've also asked people to self-define their family so we can get beyond just the household idea of family and the sort of much more broader idea of family. And what's interesting is when you get the number of people that people have in their family, Māori or Pacific people, it's a lot higher. So we had a few people who said that their whānau was like 200 people. And so there was that real difference between ethnic groups. And we've also included key questions on the environment as well. And I know that there's a lot of interest as well on the effects of climate change on mental wellbeing. And next time we do something about the environment as well, I think there's an interest in looking at the effect that has on mental wellbeing if people are concerned about things like climate change. So I think that's my last slide. And it's just, I think, a bit of an opportunity for questions since I am in the UK and it's currently 2:18 a.m. So hopefully that made sense, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer one or two.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. We really appreciate you being here today. For us, it's middle of the day, but for you, it's very early in the morning. I do have some questions for you from Slido, if that's okay. And are you able to hear me okay?
Yep. Yeah, no, I can. That's great.
Excellent. So I think I'm not sure whether you answered this question or not. You did talk about some of the measures in your survey that is in the GSS, but there's a question here that's quite popular asking if you've spoken to the Australian ABS about the upcoming GSS, because that sounds like there's a lot that Australia could learn around consultation for the development.
Well, we have talked to the ABS in the past. We haven't kind of recently. I think we do have regular conversations, so it's probably more census people talking to the ABS, but I'm happy to come and talk to the ABS if they want to hear in terms of the consultation process.
Excellent. If there's anyone here that knows anyone in the ABS, maybe you can tell them to get in touch. You'll pass it on, Jackie. Thank you. We have another one here. Are Te Kupenga measures also considered when surveying Pākehā? And you might need to explain what that is as well.
So Pākehā term for non-Māori, generally applied to European New Zealanders, but doesn't actually necessarily mean European New Zealanders. So in terms of the Te Kupenga survey, it's a post-census survey. So it's asked, we draw a sample based on if someone's got Māori ethnicity or Māori descent. And for a lot of Māori, descent is the kind of key measure. And so people will have could have a range of ethnic groups. They won't be, they could have European, Pacific, etc. So that particular survey is just asked for Māori, but we have got some questions in our General Social Survey where we ask about te reo, so whether people can hold a conversation about everyday things in te reo. And we also ask about opinions and attitudes to te reo and whether it should be used in schools, whether it should be used in signage. So there's a bit of questions about that. We also ask questions about things like how easy it is to be yourself in New Zealand. So in terms of culture and whether people feel judged on things like their ethnicity. So there are a range of questions, but those ones for Te Kupenga are mainly for Māori. But as I said, we've introduced those family wellbeing measures, so that gets asked of everyone in the GSS.
Right. And there is one more question, if you don't mind, one extra one. Is environment considered family by Māori people?
I think it's a kind of complex thing. It's considered, I couldn't include it here, but there's a lovely graphic that shows that in the kind of European worldview, you have people at the top of the hierarchy and the environment underneath. For Māori, the environment is it's all around, it's part of their spiritual connection. And there's sayings like, people may go, but the land remains. So it's called the whenua, which is also the placenta as well. So it's kind of related to, the sense of yourself and where you come from. And so it's very deeply felt. So I don't know if it's quite family, but it's like a deep inherent part of who you are. So you are the land and the land is you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rosemary. We really appreciate you spending your time in the middle of the night with us. But feel free to go to bed if you like now.
I will. I mean, it sounds like such a good conference, and if I had not been on holiday, I would have been over there like a shot, but I had this planned quite a long time ago. So all the best for the rest of your conference, and really great. I hope that wellbeing is much more embedded within Australian government and culture, as it sounds like you're on the right path.
Thank you so much.